They're, they are the world's two largest economies. We've had a change of management here in Washington. There are new relationships to build, so there's a lot to talk about. I suspect that this is the start of communications that will continue throughout this administration, and it's necessary and apparently was carried on very appropriately.
Let me move on to Joe Biden's executive order, which expands a Trump-era list of Chinese companies off limits to U.S. investors. Will this be a little hiccup that could complicate these discussions? It's like a one step forward, two steps back.
Well, I think we have to decide how many steps in each direction. But there are significant differences between the Chinese and the U.S. economic systems. The United States economy is driven very heavily by markets. In China, there is more government influence in the operation of businesses. As a result, on the U.S. side, what you're seeing is concern about the possibility that some particularly technology-oriented firms in China will be influenced by government and possibly will be able to share information that should otherwise, in a system like the United States, be kept private. So there will be differences of perspective, and these differences over time will need to be worked out.
How much do you think the COVID-19 pandemic interrupted the implementation of the Phase 1 agreement? I mean, has China, has the United States, have they managed to keep up their commitments to that agreement?
The commitments that were made in that Phase 1 agreement were extremely aggressive and optimistic. I think that even before the pandemic, there were a lot of trade experts in the United States who would have told you that they did not believe that the targets could be met. There's no question that the pandemic has had very adverse effects on trade globally, making a lot of former exchanges and contacts among people much more difficult, if not impossible. But that trade agreement really will need to be revisited if it is to come to fruition to the extent of the goals that were originally articulated. And I think that is a problem beyond the pandemic alone.
And I suppose that those wrinkles need to be ironed out before anyone is talking about lifting U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods?
The administration has determined at this point that it is not going to make the first move in reducing those tariffs. That hasn't happened yet. To achieve a sufficient agreement to move in that direction will probably require some movement on both sides. So yes, I think we need to see more discussions if we're going to achieve a smoother trade relationship, including lower tariffs.
What does the U.S., what does this administration want to see from China?
I'm sure we'd like to see some, what we would perceive to be economic reforms. The U.S., again, is a market-driven economy, which is to say government influence is limited. Outcomes in trade within the United States are driven by the perceived value of consumers. Consumers buy what they want with their funds. Companies that deliver greater value succeed, and they do so with profit in the marketplace, not with aid from government. The government influence in the Chinese economy is greater, and as a result, there is concern from the U.S. side that some Chinese firms provide lower prices because of government subsidies, and that is an issue for U.S. policymakers.
Joe, very quickly, going forward, what are your expectations in the weeks, months to come?
We need to have a continued dialogue. I think we need to have understanding about the rules of the road in a fundamentally market-driven economy. I would like to see greater understanding and a convergence between the two sides in terms of how we do business with one another. That's what we really need for progress over the long haul.